we have a letter actually, Judge, which would ask you to sign.
It's probably, the only reason I raise it is because it's probably worthwhile. You know, it's not a big deal. Since I think the subpoena went to the board.
Yes,
Chairman.
And we spoke to Judge Noka, who had responded, and we have to respond on his behalf, on the board's behalf, and it was the judge who was named, it was Judge Noka, Ethics Board. So we have to respond to the subpoena. We have that prepared and for the judge's signature, which basically says we reviewed the records and we had no record of any disclosure.
Yeah, it turns out that under the old code, the leaders of the respective parties were in fact covered, but the new code exempts them. So had there been compliance, we would have had records in our possession. Helen Henkel checked, and we had none in this particular instance, even though he was part of the mandated group that was required to answer. Is that right, Helen?
That is correct, Judge.
Okay.
The only reason I asked for an updated briefing because the board was subpoenaed to produce.
Right.
Not just the chair. So I want everybody to at least be aware of what the procedure, what procedure was followed, where we are in the procedural history. What we're
I'm
not
glad
doing.
you did this.
Right, because it's not just served on the chair, it's served on the board, and every member of this board is then responsible and subject to compliance of that subpoena.
I'm sorry, the requests were sent out from the personnel department for responding to the financial disclosure forms. There is documentation from the personnel department that at least 1 year they were definitely sent to the political party leaders. The following year, the political party leaders were no longer required because the code changed. But during the years that I have the records, there is no filing from the political party leaders.
None of them?
None.
Okay.
Did the new board, meaning us, take
Yes.
over the old records from the old board? So the old board, whatever happened before, is now under our control, the records. So we have to look through those records, right?
And Helen did, in fact.
Helen did, yes.
Yeah, I've gone through the records and I'm reporting to the current board that although it was not under your auspices, it definitely is something you should be aware of. That the records have been checked, the records were not there, and they're not required under your reign.
Yeah.
Is that something that should be changed?
Well, interestingly enough, under the Public Officers Law, there's an opt-out provision, and evidently the Charter Revision Commission, when they were going through that, chose to opt that out. Probably, it's hard to remember the discussions from my discussions with the council handled that. It probably had to do with the fact that we never received any, and we really, at the time, I remember years ago having this discussion with Bill Mooney, who was the former Corporation Counsel, I was his deputy, because we never received them, and it was, how do we get them to comply? We don't have control over them, and although we made attempts, no one ever complied, so it was a tough thing for us, because it always was as if, we weren't doing what we were supposed to do, although we did send letters and send the forms, but so probably what the Charter Revision Commission felt was that it was better to opt out of that, for that requirement in code.
If they were required under our board, if it was changed by the Charter Revision Commission in the next year or so, what power do we have to get one if we ask?
Well, I mean, the board can fine, I mean, there are some penalty sections here that they can impose. So they do have the ability, to do that. And of course, remember, I always remind the board that at some point, the board can ask our office to come up with a legislative amendments that as we work with this code, we realize some of it's maybe language, some of it may be other additions and subtractions, omissions, whatever it is, and I guess at some point that's something you may want to consider, and you bring that to the city council to add, delete, or amend. So,
But that would necessarily have to await the resolution of what's on the table before us, for you to even participate, as I think that's it. Right?
Well, I mean, we're talking about party.
No, this is more, this is more.
This is just
This is information.
General, this
This
is,
I
is-
wouldn't take part in the discussion.
not the specific complaint, this is more general.
Yeah, this-
You know, is this something that we should think about? I
Yeah,
assume
is
that
this
was
something,
the
yeah,
question.
is this something that we should consider having, when we do all these amendments, is this something we should say, hey, the city council might want to think about this? I can't see them passing it, but,
No, no.
I think they would.
you know.
We made a good enough case for its being necessary. I think they listen. They want this board to succeed, I'm quite sure.
My feeling is they would, I don't think we'd have much trouble being passed.
Interesting.
My issue with it is when you stop at just the political leaders, you go the board leaders, you go, that's the issue.
Well, that's probably what the charter revision
I
committee.
mean, where it's like saying, okay, I'm gonna ask the mayor to put in a disclosure form, that's nice, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask the council, thank you, council members. I'll stop there. You don't have the commissioners and like this and that, so you can really get into, and you can cut it off any place you want, obviously, because disclosure forms are only filed by, people with supervisory responsibility, a couple hundred people. When you deal with political parties that have different structures that you don't control, but they do have sometimes similar structures, where do you go? Political party chairs, do you want their vice chairs, do you want their executive committees, do you want their board leaders, do you want their district leaders?
You know,
We're all elected, by the way,
yeah,
Sure.
sure.
because the board leader's got to be a district leader to get elected, so I mean, you could, I'm not sure that, yes, it's worth, I think, a topic of discussion at some point in time, but
Maybe not now.
I certainly wouldn't waste a lot of energy on it at this point.
Yeah.
No, it's one thing that occurred to me the very first time I read the code, by the way, that the biggest and glaring omission was the fact that party officials, we have no sway over them. For example, you know, we've heard countless stories of some party leader, one party or another, depending on who's in control at the moment, telling a councilman, you know, you want continued support, I want you to appoint my son, my grandson, a friend, a neighbor, whatever, to a job in the city in some capacity or another. That would be, you know, if one in office, if an existing officer were to do that, he'd be clearly in violation. But when it comes, the suggestion comes from outside the system, there's nothing that can be done about it. That was the big thing that was omitted here in terms of giving teeth to the whole ethics system, in my view, that someone from outside can frustrate the whole system.
Well, maybe we should take this up at another point. When we do that list of things for the council, that would be something we're going to take on tonight.
Well, all right. Anyway, right now what we have on the table is Andy McDonald's very assiduous work